So a lot of folks on the left, well, including Democrats, they've said, look, we're going to win elections this year. We're going to keep our focus on gun control. Hasn't really worked out for them previously. I mean, you saw what happened in the 90s. Really, that issue cost Clinton his congressional majority. Now, as we reported already, Democrats are running 4 times as many gun control campaign ads this year, and their rhetoric lines right up with what you see from Mom's Demand and Everytown. In fact, they pretty much take their talking points and repurpose them without really changing anything, and they just put them on their own letterhead. They're really going far left to try to scare voters. Fear-mongering, even going so far as to putting actual targets on children in ads. But here's the question. How's that going to work when their own voter blocs are snatching up concealed handguns for themselves? Are they going to demonize their own potential voters? A new study revealed that there are 17.25 million concealed permits in the United States, and among the license holders, the biggest increases amongst women and minorities. Here to talk about this statistic, and he is a walking statistic encyclopedia. President of the Crime Prevention Research Center, John Lott. John, always good to see you. It's interesting because you always, the mom's demographic, and this is fascinating to me because I feel like this always plays into, like in the 90s you had the soccer mom, in the early aughts you had the security mom with George W. Bush, and now they're trying to make gun control the mom issue and go after that demo because they think it helps motivate votes. But as you've discussed, those women like me, we're getting our concealed carry licenses by huge numbers, even in certain states, leading the men to do it.
Right. Well, nationwide, you've had a much bigger increase in permits for women than men. I mean, it's obviously increased for both groups, but over the last 6 years, you've had over 100% faster growth for permits for women than for men.
Wow.
And it mirrors other polls that are out there. You can look at Pew has a poll that asks whether people think guns make them safer or not, and they've broken it down by different types of demographics. And what you find is that a majority of women now and a majority of blacks think that owning a gun makes them and their family safer than creating danger. And it's been, as you've seen that type of change occur, you've also seen people getting things like concealed carry permits.
Yeah, well, and I mean, moms want to make sure, women particularly, minorities particularly, they want to feel safe. It's amazing to me how, you have so many of these anti-gun Democrats that seem to find the concept of safety and being able to keep your family safe. That's a foreign idea to them. They don't quite understand that, and they don't put together that the language that they're using to describe these individuals, because they go after you really badly, they go after me, they go after anybody, any lawful gun owner. That's their base. A lot of these people are Democrats, so how are they going to reconcile that when the time comes to cast a vote?
Right. Well, the thing is, if my research teaches me anything along the safety lines that you just mentioned, is the very people, there are 2 groups of people who benefit the most from owning guns. The people who are most likely to be victims of violent crime, and that overwhelmingly tends to be poor blacks who live in high-crime urban areas. It'd be great if the police could be there all the time to protect people. And anybody who's read my work knows that I think the police are extremely important in stopping crime. But the thing is, the police themselves recognize that they almost always arrive on the crime scene after the crimes occurred. And you have to ask yourself, what's the safest course of action for people to take? And having a gun is by far the safest course of action for people. But it's particularly for those people who are most likely to be victims of violent crime. And the other group that benefits the most are people who are relatively weaker physically, women and the elderly. You're almost always talking about a young male doing a violent crime. And when a male is attacking a female, there's a larger strength difference than a man attacking another man. The presence of a gun represents a much bigger relative change in the woman's ability to go and defend herself. So I'm glad that we're seeing this change, that we're seeing that the people who benefit the most from having these guns are able to obtain them. But, what you see often with the Democrats with regard to concealed carry permits is how costly they make it for people to get permits. So if you're in Illinois, you're talking about like $450 to go through the process to get a permit. Well, who do they think they're disarming as a result of $450? I mean, it's fine that wealthy white males in the suburbs are able to go and get it, but they're not the ones who are most likely to be victims of violent crime. $450 prices out of the market the very people, the poor blacks who live in these high crime urban areas. And it's more than just that. You know, there's no training facilities in Chicago, for example. 16 hours of training require that you have to go for at least 2 days. So you have to, if you're a poor person and you don't already own a car, you're going to have to go and borrow somebody's car and travel well outside the city to go and get the training that's there. It's kind of like they've gone through every box that they can think of to see what additional things can we do to make it so that they can't get it. Well, one of the things we also point out.
It's a syntax.
Yeah. And one of the other things we point out in the report is you have two different types of states. You have these right to carry states, 42 states, that once you meet certain objective rules, you can go and carry a concealed handgun. And then you have 8 may issue states where you have to demonstrate need to some local public official. And these are fairly heavily Democratic states. I was able to go and get the list of concealed carry permits for Los Angeles County, where you have like 225 permits issued for a county of about over 8 million adults. Well, you would think, given the rhetoric about caring for minorities and women, that they would be well represented in terms of the permits they're giving out. But the permits that you see there are for wealthy, well politically connected white males. Only about 7% of permit holders in Los Angeles County are women. Only about 6% are blacks or Hispanics. Those are well below their shares of the population and well below the rates that you see them getting permits nationwide. And for women, you're talking about almost 30% of concealed carry permit holders are women. For blacks, it's over 12%. So it's like half the rate nationally that you see in these places where they have discretion on who they can decide whether or not they think you have a good enough reason to be able to go and get a permit.
Yeah, it's always up to someone else's discretion. One of the things that makes me the angriest, one of the talking points that I hear from anti-gun advocates, and you've addressed this quite extensively over at Crime Prevention Research Center, is this idea that, well, women are too weak and too stupid to be able to carry a firearm because, ladies, what's going to happen is the attacker is going to wrestle it away from you. And then they always trot out these statistics, and you always have all of these different groups that come up with their own numbers. Most of them, I think I've seen, out of the several that I've seen, I think only one actually revealed any sort of methodology. And they always try to say that these numbers discredit women saying that firearms will make them safer. You've addressed this. Tell folks what you found when you delved into what they were trying to push on in terms of this narrative.
Right. You know, the thing is, if you push on them and you ask for some source, they'll go and say something like, well, you know, police get killed with their own guns, and you have 50 police officers who are murdered each year, and maybe someplace between 0 and 5 of those are killed with their own weapon. The thing is, that's wrong on so many different levels. For example, police officers have a much more difficult job than a civilian does in using a permit concealed handgun. If you take a concealed carry class, you're going to be told you're not a police officer. Your job isn't to go and arrest somebody. The benefit that you get from having a concealed handgun is to maximize the distance between yourself and the attacker. Police officers can't do that. A police officer can't brandish his gun, watch the criminal run away, and say, oh, my job is done. A police officer has to be willing to pursue and confront and get into a wrestling match many times. And it's that time that they may lose control of the weapon that's there. If a woman who's relatively small or weaker, if she's actually in physical contact with the criminal, she's basically lost the battle at that point. She has to use her gun to keep the distance between herself and the attacker there. But, you know, it's even more than that when you're talking about these types of comparisons that are there. And, but, you know, it's, for police, for example. You don't
Right.
just look at the number of police who are killed. You look at the police who get into a physical assault with some criminal. So you have about 16,000 police officers who are seriously injured, requiring hospitalization on the average year. You have like 34,000 or so who are assaulted. So if you're talking about someplace between 0 and 5 cases where a police officer loses control of his gun and is harmed, it's 0 to 5 cases out of 16,000 or 0 to 5 cases out of 34,000. So even for police who have to go and physically confront these criminals, the rate that they lose control of their guns is very small. And it's as I said, it's a completely different type of problem than a civilian faces.
Right. Well, this is going to be a very interesting election, particularly if they keep trying to make this issue front and center. Those Democrats who obviously... Go ahead, John.
I think part of what's going on is they know that there's this normal ebb and flow when you have these off-year elections when the president of a particular party is controlling the White House, that the other side tends to win. And I think any seats that they pick up, they're going to attribute to the gun control issue, when in fact it could just be the normal pickup that they would have been getting. But one thing I'm convinced by, and that is any state legislatures or governorships or Congress that Democrats pick up, one of the first sets of bills that are going to be going through are going to be different types of gun control bills that are there. When I testified earlier this year in Virginia for the state Senate, it was pretty clear to me that if the Democrats had picked up either one more seat in either the state House or the state Senate there, so they had control over either of those two bodies, there's a large number of gun control bills that would have gone through this year in Virginia. And so it's just a question of what happens, how many legislatures they pick up. And they normally would pick up some.
They're gonna. That would be if it depending on if they are able to do so. I think you're right. They're gonna try to push that back on being on a gun control issue. It'll be interesting to see exit polling as well. John, we're out of time today, but we look forward to talking with you again soon. John Lott, Crime Prevention Research Center. John, good to see you. Thank you.
Always great talking to you.